Yeah.
Mine was fever,
Yeah.
absolute body aches,
Yeah.
chills,
Yeah.
like.
Five.
Page 25 is
Budget admin.
Mayor.
admin.
Okay. Where you want to start?
I want to start with conversation with the mayor as soon as we're up and running.
Switch seats with you.
I don't think we can start until another 2 minutes.
I have 6:30. That's
Do
fine.
you?
I had to run out
good.
to the car and get them.
All set?
I
Thank
don't
you.
have any extras with me, sorry.
So I'd like to call the Capital Improvement City Development meeting to order at 6:30. Sitting on this committee is Vice Chair Laura Dolan.
Waterman.
Ty Waterman is the Vice Chair?
Ty Waterman is the vice chair, unless I'm the vice chair on like 12 committees because something's wrong. I think it's Ty.
Thank you.
Yeah, I moved to your committee where
You're
I
a
am.
member on my committee.
Right, but I'm not the vice chair there, so they had to give me something where I was vice chair.
So Vice Chair Waterman and Member Dolan.
Right. I was the vice chair,
Alright.
but I got
You're still very
demoted.
important.
Thanks, Ty.
Very important. Mayor, before we get into thank you for coming tonight.
Of course, yeah.
Before we get into the discussion about the urgent projects that need to be funded this year, the committee is expecting that the budget will carry $500,000 again this year in capital improvements.
Probably not. What we're going to do, instead of using the budget process to put it in, we'll probably use free cash after certification in October. We're looking at another tight budget year, and so it won't be funded with, like I said, the normal, budget process. But we'll still do something with that, though, and it will be $500,000. But it's just probably going to have to be free cash.
So you're saying it won't be a line item in the budget?
The budget will continue to have the $500,000, or the line open, available, ready to be funded, but we're going to have to do a transfer with municipal council from free cash after it's certified in October to, it's exactly what we did this fiscal year. It was the exact same thing. We didn't budget for it last year. We used free cash to pay for it. I have the free cash sheet, I could tell you one, but yes, I'm just pulling up the email you just sent me, that's all. Does that answer that question though?
So does that mean that nothing will be accomplished in capital improvements and city development until October?
Not exactly. We still could use reserve for transfer, the reserve fund for transfer. That's a possibility, when necessary, but it's, in the absence of that, yes, likely. If we didn't use reserve fund for transfer. I'm actually just looking for the email that you had sent me. There it is, I found it, okay. Okay, just had the list of urgent items you wanted to go over. I just wanted to make sure I have it in front of me.
So if that's the case, when you send your budget down to the council, we're even more inclined to be careful in looking at the budget to see if we can cut things out to make the free cash pile bigger, or the reserve fund for transfer bigger, or perhaps put $500,000 in the capital improvement budget.
Well, in the past two budgets that I've done here, the number one goal is no layoffs anywhere, because if we have layoffs, then you have decreased services. So we, put forward a budget. The council didn't change anything, and that was appreciated, because a cut anywhere would have resulted in service cuts somewhere, wherever that cut was. This year, right now, we are right around $2 million off with the budget, and it was a $2 million deficit. That includes that $500,000 capital improvement line. So if we remove that $500,000, now the budget has a deficit of about $1.5 million. What's that?
I'm sorry, sir, but I thought today when we had the discussion, the $2 million deficit includes the $500,000 already removed. If you put it back in, you'd be 2.5 out.
You might be right, yeah. So, you know, there's a number of things that we would like to fund that we can't. You know, we're gonna have to use free cash when that becomes certified in October. This is gonna be one of those things, and I do believe Deb, the auditor, is correct about that. One of the problems with the budget deficit is that the governor's cherry sheet that was released, you know, just last week did not do us any favors with Chapter 70 funding. We're hoping the House and the Senate come through a little better for us. But before the governor's cherry sheet was released, I want to say we were of the magnitude of 1.7 million off or 1.9 million off. Once the governor's cherry sheet was released, it was, you know, 2.5 million off. It was a deficit, and that's right. It was, yeah. So if we remove that, then that brings us down to about $2 million of a deficit. If we remove that $500,000 CIP line. So, but I wouldn't fret. I know the making progress on this large book is very important to you. It's important to every department head as well. When the free cash gets certified, we'll do the exact same thing this year that we, you know, we did this year. We'll do in the FY21, which would be I send a request down to the municipal council to transfer $500,000 from free cash to the CIP line.
That's sobering.
It's not good news.
No.
None of it's good news. No, certainly not.
No.
But you know, every year, I think, as I say, every budget we have every department underfunded, understaffed, under-equipped, and every year it was a tough budget year. We just the services that need to be provided to the city and the equipment needed by the departments to provide that is lacking every single year. I like what we're doing right now, and this was, you know, something that you asked me to do, is to put a $500,000 line in the budget, and it, you know, that helps chip away at this this book. So that's something we're going to do again this year. It's just a matter of timing.
So there's a couple things that I'd like to discuss with both you and particularly with Deb and the committee, and that there's some items in the book that could be handled by departments by themselves, and this reflects a conversation you and I had with the librarian last Wednesday at lunch. For example, Deb and I were talking before the meeting started. The Council on Aging pointing is a small project that only costs estimated $11,500. On the top of my head, I don't know what the Council on Aging budget is, but would it be possible to ask the department head to take the project and stretch it between 2 fiscal years? So if she started to work in, say, July, with anything that's left over in her budget, to start the pointing, and then picked it up started in June, picked it up in July to finish the project on the next budget, it would have less of a severe impact on her annual budget. Is there a possibility that some of that could be done?
You know, that's a good question, and it makes sense, but that's actually a question I would defer to the auditor, because when we start purchasing stuff in one fiscal year and then finishing it off in another, that gets a little bit complicated. So I defer to the auditor for whether, like, the limitations on that. I know there might be some, but, you know, could you tell us that?
So, okay, so I think specifically this one particular thing is one that kind of struck me as, I'm like, to me, reading the definition, the dollar amount, the repairing of the bricks and the chimney at the base, and the repairing of the main roof to address and eliminate water damage. Page 26 of the book. I thought it's more of an operational expense, a repair, an operational expense. So to your point, Counselor, if say $5,000 of this was identified as an appropriation of $5,000 in June, you could do, and then from reserve fund for transfer, other available sources if somebody had it, and then you could chip away at some of the smaller things. To your point, Mayor, if the council through you, made an appropriation for a specific allotment of money, particularly as it relates to year end. If you funded all 11,500, we would treat it similar to an article in a town, and that money would be specifically reserved for the project that the council and the mayor said this 11.5 is appropriated for the purposes of repointing and the chimney work and that kind of stuff. To me, this particular item was what I kind of brought up because I'm like, this is so small, it might really, if it was broken out, really be more of a maintenance operation thing so that a major chimney project doesn't become a huge capital expense in the future.
So what I was thinking is that if coming towards the end of the year, let's say April, May, the department head is looking at the budget and the expenditures and sees that there's $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 sitting there that didn't get expended in either education classes or office supplies or routine things, that rather than returning that money to the general budget at the end of the year, that it could be applied to a capital project for the department. So that, and in the library, she said that she'd had that. Now, I made that recommendation to Joan Pilkington Smith several years ago, and I thought it never actually occurred, but the librarian tells me that she has, in fact, a very small amount of money, so that if something happens, like a wall gets scratched, she's got enough money there to get the wall repaired, you know, or a rug gets torn and it's a public safety issue, then she can replace that section of the rug. So my thinking was, why can't we have our departments looking at that more, to each department be carrying a capital improvement fund in addition to us having a global, because there's some things that don't generate any money, like the Sanford Street building. We spent so much money to get that garage tuned up. We need another $10,000 to get it finished. It'd be a crime not to finish it. You see what I mean?
So, I don't know. So two things. One, if let's say my budget, right? Let's pretend I had a surplus in my budget and I had a capital need. If my budget has that surplus at year end or toward year end in a professional service, I would have to go to the administration and ask for that money to be now used to buy the capital item so that it's in the proper account. I'd have to go to the administration. If the administration agreed with it, it would have to come to the council for it to be transferred into the appropriate account for execution for payment. So that theoretically could happen. What's the downside of all of a sudden transferring all the money and using it? Any unused dollar on the expenditure side also helps to buffer your free cash. So instead of having multiple little departments of $5,000 repair, if the mayor knew Deb's turning back $5,000 in the accounting and somebody else is turning back, you know, $10,000 and there's $8,000 over here, he may be saying, you know what, I know I have $23,000. That $23,000, I think, as the chief executive officer of the city, a better use of that money might be the acquisition of the $23,000 vehicle I need in this department. So I think it would be a balancing act and up to the administration, but in order to affect that change within the department would have to go through the administration and then a change in the appropriation from the council. Because if it's in the professional service line, to get it into a capital-like line, or even the difference between a professional service and a supply, if it doesn't really hit the definition of the $10,000 dollar amount in the asset groupings that I do, you'd still have to go from professional service to a supply. And that, again, would take the mayor and the council to do. So it's not impossible to do, but there's a consequence to everything.
Yeah. It's basically a policy decision, what Deb is describing. As far as these surpluses go at the end of the fiscal year in each department, very unlikely. I mean, does it happen? Sure, it happens, but it's every department is already funded in such a lean manner that we don't fund in a way so that anybody's going to have a surplus, because as I said before, every department is inadequately staffed, equipped, funded. So having some type of surplus is not something I would, count on. If it happened, then it would be one of two things. As we said, it could either be, let's put together these little tiny surpluses and maybe let that roll over to free cash so we can use it as a bigger project, or we transfer money around and apply it towards a project right now. It kind of something that we have to look at the moment and see what the real needs are. I listen to all the department heads. The department heads are really the ones who come up with this CIP. It's their input for what the needs are in each respective department that creates this. This isn't anything that I create based on, you know, things that I see. It's the feedback from the department heads.
So, the Capital Improvements and City Development Committee is working with the Budget and Administration Committee jointly in joint meetings to get a better understanding of the finances, the debt obligation, and the stress that your budget is feeling. I spoke with the chairman of Budget and Administration, Councilor Delicio, today, and asked him if he would set something up for late February for another meeting, because we had a lot of progress in our first meeting, and I think we need 2 more before the budget gets delivered, so that we have a deeper understanding of how to react to that budget. The second thing is that our communication line has been open very well since you've taken office, and I'd like to see that continue. And that as we sit down and we finish our recommendation to you, which is going to be sparse because there's no money, we would appreciate meeting with you again afterwards and talking about, especially as October rolls around, to what we, and so maybe what we'll do is maybe we'll issue a recommendation now, and we'll revisit it in September, so that when October rolls around, we could take action.
Yeah, I would like to think that the recommendation that you send to me is probably going to be the same list of priorities I come up with, because we're getting them from the same source, the department heads, and you know, that consistency is good, because that will help just usher things through the council. But you made a comment earlier about the sparsity of money. It's absolutely true. It's just, you know, we're limited by Prop 2.5, and you know, and plus new growth, and that's, you know, and I would say probably 90 or 95% of our budget goes to salaries, but there's not much left over for capital improvements. Today we had probably a 2-hour meeting with the auditor, the treasurer, and the outgoing budget director, and as it turns out, we are looking at about $240,000, I want to say it was, of that magnitude, where we have less debt. However, we have to be very careful not to let that debt capacity get eaten up by operating budget, because once we lose that debt capacity, it's really tough to get it back. That debt capacity is what pays for, as you know, pays for larger capital projects when we have to bond for them. So we spent about 2 hours today talking about that, and it was very, very useful, very productive meeting we had among the 4 of us.
Okay, great. Is there anything you want to leave with us?
You know, we as you go through the 3 different items in the mayor's office for this during the CIP, the first one is renovate Academy building. That is a priority too. It's something that we keep trying to put money towards, just a little bit of money each year, because it's involving the preservation of one of our city buildings. Also resurfacing the parking lot at Government Center. That's something that we don't need to do right now. It's eventually it might become a little bit worse, but
So would you agree with me that because the budget is so tight, and because we're not gonna be really releasing any capital improvement projects until October, that our focus should strictly be on urgent items?
oh yeah, certainly. Yeah, and then there's also the lighting retrofit. So that's all number 1. So none of the items in the mayor's office are urgent.
No, the only thing I think that I would really push for in your control is the repair of the Sanford Street parking garage to finish that project. So it's in the book as a priority number 1, but I'd like to move that up to urgent, because I don't think it'll get funded if it's not urgent, and it's only $10,000 to finish the ceiling and the spackling, and it's largely cosmetic, but since we've already spent about $1 million.
You said starting on page 25.
25 maybe.
25, yeah.
Haven't we already started the retrofitting?
Yes.
The lights?
Yes.
Yeah, the lights, yeah. That's something that there's two silos of the retrofitting of lights. One of them is the National Grid owned lights, of which there's about 4,000 throughout the city, and National Grid is taking care of that cost. And then the other is the city-owned street lights, the decorative street lights in the downtown. That is complete, but the National Grid one with the 4,000. So repair Sanford Street parking garage Phase 2, and that is something that, I mean, that is something that I'll talk with Barry, the outgoing Director of Budget Administration, say for the camera's purpose, and I will ask him where he saw this, had he stuck around, when this was going to get funded. I'll find out from him what he had in mind about that. It was clearly in FY21. You're asking for it to be funded sooner. I'll ask him if he sees any problem with that, because we have 2 more days to get, work out of him. So we'll go ahead and, make every use we can of him. So, yeah, I'll ask him and get back to you on that.
So it's just that, and replace and reconfigure the core switch, which is in the MIS department. That was an urgent item last year. It's dropped down to a priority number 1. So I'm guessing that, he doesn't think that that's such an urgent thing anymore, and that's going to drop off the list.
I will find out from Bill Lennox, MIS Director, where he sees that as well. Again, this was something that is...
Otherwise, it's definitely not going to make it. Yes.
So, so a couple of things. That I met with Bill about this because I wanted to get a better understanding of what it was, and I think his expectation is that he would consider a real priority. I don't know why it's listed as a 1 as opposed to urgent, unless it's by definition.
Well, last year it was urgent.
Yeah, so
I'm perplexed.
yeah, so I actually asked Bill lots of very specific questions about the piece of equipment. The fan's already been replaced, the power supply's been replaced. It's not in the budget. His understanding and expectation was that at some point it would be through free cash. Through his chain of command would be Barry, so I think in the next couple of days it's a really good idea if we touch base with Barry. The other piece, the priority project for the Sanford Street lot, I didn't have an opportunity to specifically talk to Barry about that one, but where it's just in the $10,000 range, I did go back and look at your fund balance in the revolving fund rolling forward for the last 3 years, which has been $362,000 in 19, $294 in 18, and $228 in 17. We haven't charged any of the parking clerk salary expenses to that particular funding source. Given your current balance in that, I think you could reasonably have a $10,000-ish expense out of your revolving fund. We can chat to Barry.
We also have another $33,000 left of the $500,000 CIP line that we took from free cash. So there's multiple places that we could pay for that. I don't like to spend money until the department head says, you have to spend the money. Like we need it, or we're going to have a break in services. People are going to get hurt. That's when the department head is coming to me and saying something like that. That's when I'm sending the request down to the council. It's not because the council is not getting requests from me because I think it would be fun to purchase something, or I'm excited to spend money on something. It's usually when push comes to shove and a department head is saying, we really can't wait any longer. I've been talking to you about this for a long time. We really have to do this now.
So, that pretty much covers the things that we had for you, and you're welcome to stick around if you'd like. But we're going to move on to the DPW with Mike, because he's got some serious problems.
He does, and we've made some pretty good progress. In fact, in fairness to DPW, when I came on board 2 years ago, Gary Arasian said to me, Gary Arasian, as everybody knows him for the purpose of the camera, the city land planner, he said, well, the one department who has not been getting the equipment it needs and the resources it needs is DPW. And that has resulted in us taking out, I think, about $700,000, 700 and change, a little over $700,000 in new trucks, dump trucks, and we've gotten a new street sweepers and sidewalk sweepers over the last couple of years. So we're trying to account for that need that they have, because DPW is a public safety department. Without DPW doing their jobs, police and fire can't respond in a snowstorm. Without DPW doing their job, people are going to hurt themselves when they're walking down sidewalks. Motorcyclists are going to slip on the sand, in the spring when they are riding. DPW is a public safety department. It should be thought of as a public safety department. I don't think that often happens. I think people think of it as a quality of life, but it's much more than a quality of life.
So Mike, if you would just pull your chair right up to the table and join the mayor, we're gonna move into DPW, and DPW is on page, starts on page
78.
78? Yep.
I actually
78.
have, commitments outside
Okay.
of here, but, Mike, do you have a copy of the CIP? You do? Okay, good. So, if anybody has any more questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, you're in good hands with Mike.
Any questions for the mayor? All set, thank you.
All right, take care. Thanks. Thanks, Mike. Thank you. Good to see you.
Well, Mike, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I like being here. So I just want to do a disclosure. I broke my hearing aid today, so I did the best job I could fixing it so I could come to the meeting tonight, but you hear a giant screeching sound. It's not one of the kids with the cat by the tail. It means my quick fix might have failed. So I'm going to try the best I can. It seems to be working pretty adequately.
So I'll speak loudly for you, Mike, how's that? I wear two of them, so I share your pain. We're really focusing only on the urgent projects in your department. And so when we start on page 78, we look at the urgent projects, we come right up to the Handy Street culvert. And that's a $175 expense, but at the same time, I see that you had a second culvert, Handy Street and Forest Street. So you've got two street drainage projects that are both urgent and both looking to get done in 2021. Is there any possibility of any economies by combining those two projects together?
Well, first of all, any project that I have that has a major construction job, I'm trying to go out for grants for it, any one of them. That's how we just got the one for Peckham Street culvert, same way. So we keep our ears open for anything that this may cover. Forest Street, actually, there may be a slight change to that because the new business that is going to be put over there, the marijuana facility, as part of the stipulation from conservation and planning. Don't know if the city council is aware or not, but the drainage that comes all the way down Stocky Ave, Holden Street, crosses over to the old TI complex, goes underneath that railroad bridge right there, and it's on the back side of where they want to put this medical, I don't know if it's medical marijuana, but the marijuana facility. It is a small brownfield site. It was capped years ago. We had to go in there and dig and find this drainage because they were having major backups over at the community college. They actually have a force pump over there that forcefully pumps that water into those catch basins. So once we found everything with the permission of the DEP and EPA of what we could do and what we couldn't do, we made a recommendation because now this facility wants to put a parking lot over that. So I went to Nick and said, we need an upgrade of the drainage before they do this. The last thing we want is them to put this building in, a brand new parking lot, and then have the drainage fail. So we were able to do that, so that's gonna be a significant savings to the city right there. So we're always looking for ways, Councilor Conti, to not pay for it with city funds.
So can we take Forest Street off the list?
I just got to see the whole scope of the project. Most of it, I'm going to say that probably 85 to 90% will be off that list, yes.
So Handy Street remains a problem.
Yes, I'm still trying to find out at Handy Street they did some remediation work now, and now they're calling it the phase 2, and I'm not completely familiar with it. I'm going to be completely honest. I'm not completely familiar with the final upgrade of that is.
Okay, so some work was started, because I do remember us funding some work near a bridge at the bottom of a hill. And someone donated a bunch of land to the city, I think,
Yeah.
on Handy Street.
That's
And
right.
it was done in concert with that. So you're gonna get more familiar with the Handy Street, and if that becomes a more pressing issue, you need to let us know.
Correct.
Can we move into vehicles, because that seems to be your most urgent?
Sure, I would like to talk about the, so you're only talking about the urgent.
Page 86 in the book.
I do just want to make this council aware about the, as I have made Councilor Jackson aware, and the mayor the other day. So the set of lights that at Rathburn Willow Drive and Thatcher Street for that we put in. So I think the Seoul Council knows they supported we have total designs for that intersection being a fully functioning traffic light before the reopening of Rathbone. Put in for 2 funding sources for that. If you're talking roughly between $800,000 and $1 million for the project totally. Because anything we do, we're requesting state funds, which we are for that project, calls for a complete streets. So that means with complete streets, we have to have all ADA compliant sidewalks in the area. We're gonna have to put bike paths down there, not bad things, but something that's $650,000, just goes up, 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 up. So we did not get the grant for safe routes to schools. I sent it into Mass DOT to get it on the TIP program. These are great little projects because even though their program is 4 or 5 years out and their funding that they've expended already, a project that's $1 million or under is what they call a good drop one, because if another project for some reason, a permit hold up or something happens, you would go down to Mass DOT, they're putting a hold on the project temporarily. That's when we'd be able to sneak in and say, we want our project shovel ready. So we would request $850,000 to $900,000. Unfortunately, Mass DOT rejected the application, saying the traffic counts were not high enough. So that's a problem. I went down there and battled with them quite a few times because I said, we have a set of lights currently at Snell Street that we were actually talking about removing once we put this new traffic lights up, so we'd have more of a staging area for cars. And they still weren't buying it. It's just one of those offices where the boxes didn't get checked, so it goes back. It doesn't proceed forward. I had asked Representative Hawkins to come down to my office and speak with me about it and try to get the mass delegation to look at it more of a safety issue than more of a traffic count, check the boxes issue. Both of my kids went to Studley and Brennan. I can't imagine putting more traffic on that road and trying to get out of that killer intersection without something there in front of it. So we're looking at a different angle. We're looking at different funding sources. The mayor did state that if everything fell through, it's very important to have a signal there. Maybe the city might have to fund it, and that's going to be the last hope that we would have for this.
So this signal is the signal that's on Thatcher Street?
Thatcher Street and South Ave. Well, yeah, it's a little bit before South Ave meets Thatcher Street.
Yeah. And you think it's $1 million?
It could just very well move up to urgent status very quickly because of the opening of that road. I think everybody here, I'm not trying to play know-it-all, but I am on the school building committee on that. The opening of that road has to deal with the design of the building. So it's not like one piece can be separated from the other, and that's something I tried to explain to the state. I couldn't understand why they weren't going to allow a traffic signal in an area that's going to provide access all the way from K to 12. I mean, everything's right there, Studley, Brennan, and the high school. So, but I just wanted you guys to know that this thing could move up very quickly because we're only about 2 years away.
I appreciate the heads up.
Excuse me, Councilor Conti.
Let's talk about vehicles.
Well, can I, excuse me, Councilor Conti.
Yep.
Can I just add
Yes.
something to that? Thank you very much. So last night, Representative Hawkins met with President Cooper before our regular meeting. And I know they discussed this whole thing, coming together as a city and saying, and the state, Senate and representatives saying, you know what, this is an urgent priority. So I know they discussed it, and I know the mayor has discussed it as well as you and I have discussed it before. So hopefully, with a little pressure from all city officials, that maybe we can get them to relook at this mass dot, and that's what Representative Hawkins is hoping for as well. Yeah.
Well, please guide us on anything that we can do to help, because anyone with any sensibility that drives that road or has a child in any one of those buildings has been asking for this traffic light ever since they've come to Attleboro. I mean, it's a top priority with every parent of every child that goes to school there, and has been for a long time. So anything we can do, let's do it.
Yep. Agreed.
The mayor's informed us that money is really, really tight, and we're not likely to fund anything until probably October. But you have some really urgent needs, as well as a need to think of the whole vehicle plan, replacement plan, so that we don't get back to where we are right now, where there's vehicles sitting in the yard, not going anywhere.
That's a correct comment, and, so, just so everybody's aware, the city of Attleboro receives $1.2 million a year in what they call Chapter 90 money. So that is to fix our roads. It really sounds like a lot of money until I break it down for you. So Attleboro basically right now has about 183 miles of roadway that we maintain, almost 90 miles of sidewalks. We have over 5,000 catch basins in this city with Lincoln piping. And we also own 3 dams, believe it or not. We have Farmer's Pond, Mechanics Pond, Simmons Pond, that all are in need of some type of repair work. As you know, Farmer's Pond just needed emergency work done to it over the course of the late summer that we performed. So to break it down for you, $1.2 million, what does it look like? I can basically do about 3 miles of roadway with that. So if you take, just as an example, if you take Wilmot Street, that road is about 1 mile long, I can do about 3 of those. So if I'm only doing 3 miles a year of roadway, and I gotta go just riding off to 180 miles, it's kinda easy to see where it would take 60 years to do every road in Attleboro. So it's not possible. So you take that dollar figure, so we basically do somewhere around $800,000 of paving a year. We do $200,000 of sidewalks, and we do another $200,000 in drainage. So, like I say, when you put the numbers of roadway, the miles of pipe that we have, the miles of sidewalk that we have, and you start putting 800,000, 200,000, 200,000, you're not really making a dent. It's
So it was 2 years ago that you had a study done, or the state funded a study for you that said you need $2.9 million a year to keep the roads in the condition that they're currently in. The only way to get that is if the city was to have less services provided to its residents, because there's nobody in the budget for that $2.9 million. Councilor Dolan.
So, not to get off topic, but since we're on basins and drainage and all that stuff, the new basins that they're doing for the new construction, that's going to be handed over to the city eventually, and that's going to, do you see that being a problem? Because I find that very concerning.
You mean the storm scepters?
Like down on Ritchie Road?
A storm scepter requires, cannot be cleaned with the traditional. So the city of Attleboro, let me back up. So the city of Attleboro, we have what we call a catch basin cleaning truck. That's the one you see on the side of the road, that's got like the grab claw on it.
We don't have the one that goes.
That's right. So, but that only does vertical cleaning. So the catch basin itself. And what's the purpose of that? Is to get down the sediment below the pipe so it's not blocking the pipe so it can disperse. Or if it doesn't have any pipes, it'd be called a leaching basin that filters out through the earth. So this is important to do that. You cannot use that to clean a storm scepter. A storm scepter has certain levels. It catches.
What do you
catches
call it?
a hard
storm
sediment.
what?
It catches it. Storm scepter. They're almost required by conservation in all these new developments unless they have some type of replicated wetland, retention ponds, detention ponds, and all these. Those have to be backed out. That needs a back to tuck to be done.
So what I'm talking about on Ritchie Road is that's what needs to be done with those.
I don't know the exact extent of the problem over there because it's not.
Oh, right. I'm not asking you to address the problem. I'm saying once this is done, then it becomes our responsibility. Is that correct?
Yes, once the city council accepts a road, then we own everything. We own.
Right,
We own
I
the
find
roadways, we own the sidewalks, we own all the drainage, we own believe it or not, we own the detention ponds. So that's another thing that the city of Attleboro has. We have over 500 detention ponds that we're supposed to maintain in the city of Attleboro. And they don't get the proper maintenance because it's strictly man-powers and, man-hours versus something like that. We've had detention ponds that have trees that are almost fully grown in them.
Do those change anything? Do those make things better for somebody somewhere, the environment, or what?
Yeah, absolutely.
So these, what they have on Ritchie Road, those are a better option than what we typically do.
I have to just make sure those are storm scepters, because Ritchie Road was put in before I'd have to look at the plan, but I imagine you're talking about
Yeah,
storm
they have like
scepters?
1, 2, 3 of all these basins, and one fills up, and then
Yep, so
and
that's,
they're not supposed to stay full, but they
That's right.
do.
it's supposed to take the sediment in different compartments.
Right.
So they do have a use, you know? I don't wanna get all over that about my opinions on,
That's fine.
some
I'll-
of that, but
I'm good.
they
Thank
do
you.
have a use though, yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So, if I can ask you, is your thinking going along the lines that if a developer wants to build a subdivision that's gonna require some scepter, that there should be some kind of perpetual funding to maintain the storm scepter?
Well, from my understanding, which is somewhat limited, it's going to be our responsibility. And this is, from my understanding, new. Correct me on anything that I say wrong. So I find it concerning. I find it concerning that we're going to own this. Do we have the equipment and the manpower to maintain them? And if this is the right choice. And, you know, so if we're allowing builders to do this, or asking them to do this, or whatever the case is, or they're choosing to do this, we're going to own it.
So this requires a Vector truck.
Right.
That's where this is
Just to
going.
touch on that, but I think it's a great point, because we've had this talk with conservation and planning, is they come up with all these new type of drainage systems, replicated wetlands, like I said, detention ponds, retention ponds. And so we're supposed to oversee the building of them. I mean, we can't be there all day long while they're doing this stuff, so we just get a push. But at the end of the day, how do we know that they are worked to be as a design? We don't. So what I've started with them, and the planning board agreed, is we're holding back the acceptance of these. I want to see them for one full year and how that cycles, and listen to because you're perfectly correct on that. The developer is going to walk away, and then the residents are going to be all over the city of Attleboro now, and we didn't create the problem, we inherited the problem.
Right, and if we accept the problem, then it's going to be our
Exactly,
problem.
so I wanted to see almost a 1 year. Avalon Estates is a perfect example of that right now. I mean, there was just some things I didn't like.
Off
Off of
Slater.
Slater Street,
Yeah.
right before the Rehoboth line.
Yeah.
It's just, they just,
It's a hot mess.
they're designing so
Yeah.
many different types of systems, you have to be a professor in all of it just to understand the demographics of how they're being built.
So I don't recall what the process is for releasing the bond on a developer.
So it depends on what type of bond it is.
Okay.
The cash bonds are released through a process that involves the Department of Public Works and the Planning Department, the Treasurer's Office. Authorization comes through those agencies, and then the check gets cut from our office. Performance bonds would also need to be released, but that would involve the developer to have purchased the bond. I'm trying to remember, and I don't remember if this has been a long time, one of the other issues with some of the, and I'm not sure if it's called a detention or retention pond, back in the day where they were separate map and lot, and then ultimately whoever it was just didn't pay the taxes on it, so you'd end up with it anyway. You know what I mean, whether you accepted it or not. There was, I can remember, that was a while ago, Ethel was here, and I'm not 100% certain what the status of that. So it's not necessarily a new or unique problem. I think in talking to some of my colleagues recently, as I kind of went through this book, the NIPDs and the potential of what the drainage stuff goes forward and the changes in permitting and all that other stuff, that becomes when some of these, the ability for us to come up with some way to fund the maintenance of those catch basins and detention ponds and the ones that are subsurface and above surface and all of that other stuff. It's pretty enlightening, and it's complex, and it's gonna, again, everything costs money. So the question becomes, how do you address it on a go-forward basis? But I think you've raised some pretty valid points. Yeah.
And I feel that if we do wait the year or whatever it is we need to do, I think we need to think of this going forward. So hypothetically, if we have a development and their bond's $200,000, just to make my math easy, if we have time and energy that we put into researching this, maybe their bond's twice as much if it's going to come down on the city. Because we go through, I mean, you and I have had this conversation with our hair on fire about stuff like this. and to be preemptive, basically. That's just my point. If we research that year and we see issues, whatever we think might be forthcoming, if they're choosing to do this, we need to do something about it to make sure that we don't eat it in the end.
So are you thinking that the council should initiate through new business higher bonding for developers?
I think we need more research before we were to do anything with that, you know?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
The bond ultimately has to be released upon performance. My question is, do we charge a fee associated with the installation of a retention pond that would eventually be used towards the maintenance of it in the future? Is our fee sufficient? Do we not charge one? Is that, I don't know the answer. I'm just saying that.
That's why I,
Yeah.
instead of just saying,
The problem with the bonds are once something is performed on, eventually I believe it has to get released. I'm not sure.
But another
about the other
problem with the
piece.
bonds is you have builders that walk away.
Right.
That you have their 150,000 or whatever it is, and they're like, and now the 10 things that are on their list cost 250,000. And then we gotta put it out to bid, we gotta use the solicitor, we gotta pay somebody to do the work, and then we end up in the red.
I think the long-term maintenance issue is something that I think is a really valid point to bring. I can say, of late, my experience with what DPW planning, I think they're much more involved in the appropriate planning process of how much to make the bonds come in at. Like, they do better math and they do more upfront to say, we need a higher bond, so that hopefully at the end of failure to perform, we're not stuck with the complete performance.
And we need to do on the back end where we don't allow developments to go on for 10, 15 years before we perform on the bond.
If I could recognize
So I have a
Jackson.
question. So you know how they developed the sidewalk fund? So when developers are building a development, but they're not gonna put the sidewalks in on both sides, and so they have to give so much money, and it goes into a special fund. I don't know, is it a possibility for us to create such a fund for, yeah?
I don't know. I think
Okay.
that comes down to
Yeah.
the research. Mike, do we already charge a fee for retention ponds? Do you know?
Maintain after, no.
Not to maintain, but like just to install one. Is that under planning, Concom? I think
It's
it
all-
warrants
it's all part of the
absolute
drainage.
conversation.
It's all part of the drainage. It's like I said, like something like Avalon Estates, that doesn't have any structures in there at all. There's nothing. It relies upon swales and detention areas.
It's a hot
So-
mess.
So when we say drainage, you could be talking about a RCP pipe, you could be talking about a catch basin, but it's one as a whole. So we give a value to that.
But DPW gives the value based on the plan approved through the planning department. Is that fair? Like, I guess the question is, who do I ask the question of? Is this really a DPW question, or should I be kind of going to Nick and Gary and saying?
We only make recommendations to the planning board. So, but we set the bond rate, and they've never not accepted it. I mean, we've done it just through past history and talking to other departments about,
Yep.
how have they handled
But
it,
you're setting the bond rate based on the subdivision plan presented to you.
presented to you.
Right, so you're not necessarily the entity saying you have to do the swales, the catch basin, the subsurface. That's a function of planning, and then, I'm asking, I'm not telling. So like, if that development comes before you, and you say, they have a catch basin, we think the bond piece for the catch basin needs to be X number of dollars until it's done, and we won't release it until a year of good performance.
We do that.
Right.
If I could, I'd like to get back to the capital improvement plan.
Yes, sorry.
Talk about the Vector truck, because this is what it relates to. Have you rented a Vector truck? Has the department rented a Vector truck in the past?
Probably use a Vector, and I'm gonna tell you, we're only able to we're only reacting to a situation. We're not able to go out there and most of the time and take care of it before it happens, even though it's kinda hard to say. But I usually use the back service maybe 10 times a year. When I have a drainage issue, where I know I got a blockage in a pipe that's horizontal and there's no way I can get to it. So we do use a vendor for that. Probably about 10 times a year, but again, we're just reacting to a situation. We don't have anything to do with it as a
And
maintenance.
how much
cost.
does it cost when you use a vendor to come in and use a Vector truck?
Like I said, we use him about 10 times a year, and he's, I think it's $1,700 a day. We also, if available, wastewater department has a vac truck. So if I get in a real fix, and the contractor's not able to come down, I call Tom. We had the situation last year, and Tom can do that, and then they just have to chlorinate the truck because we have two different, the drainage system and the wastewater, two separate systems.
So if you were to have a Vector truck, you would ideally have a stormwater management separate department unit trained on that, and that's.
In all honesty, you would have to. I mean, I don't, if you park that truck down my yard tomorrow, I'm gonna be lucky if I use it 10 or 15 times a year because I just don't have the personnel.
Right, so we have it as an urgent project.
What
but
page are you on?
I'm on page 86. So you have it as an urgent project, but it's not an item that the department is set to carry.
I think it's been more of a push from planning and conservation, that because of the NIPD's permit, that this has been on here for 20 years. I mean,
Right.
this machine started off at, I think, about $215,000.
Right, I remember
Now
that.
it's gone up to almost $700,000.
Councilor Blair and I have a running joke about the Vector truck. It's
Yeah.
been there ever since Peter's been on the council, which is a dog's age.
Yeah.
More than a dog.
Can I ask a question?
Going down the dump trucks that you have listed, you've got a 6 to 8 yard dump truck, you've got a loader, you've got a 1-ton dump truck, you've got a G2 truck. Is there one of these that you want first?
What did we already buy?
Yes, because H25 is, well, first of all, thank the city council for approving the capital improvements that we got this year. It's very exciting today, the brand new backhoe pulled up on a trailer, so that's a very exciting time for my department. So again, thank you all for that, but
Are any of the ones we bought on here?
H25 should have been replaced 3 years ago.
Right.
So H25 is the trucks that you saw in the yard that day, just to put numbers in perspective when you guys come down on Saturday. The two big trucks that were sitting in the corner, the orange one was H19. The one that was all white was H24. As I've said, the tradition was in the past, and we're kind of copying that now, was to buy tandem vehicles. So they buy 2 a year. H24 and H25 are twins. But I have to run it. I have a need for that truck, so we're holding it together. But the two trucks that we're getting off the capital improvement plan are replacing H19 and H24 that were taken off this list. But
So
25 is in
right.
the same exact condition, dire straits, no floorboards. We've got street signs under the seats to hold you up. So it's in poor shape, but again, it's a numbers game. We need it.
So just to buy these 4 items, you're talking $981,000, which is a bond.
Which 4 are you on?
We're
sir?
talking page
Are you
80,
talking with the Vector?
page
Vector
87.
sector?
No, just page 87. You've got a 6-yard dump truck at 147, a loader at 189, a 1-ton dump truck at 70, and a dump truck at 90. You're right, I must have put,
Yeah,
I
you
put
would
the
have to
Vector
include
truck
the
in.
Vector, yeah.
I did put the Vector truck in there. So, you're looking at,
496.
$500,000.
It sounds like H25 is a real priority. Am I correct on that?
Absolutely, absolutely. H25 it's in bad shape. It's a real bad shape.
I mean, what can we do with it now? As it is.
These are what they call the general, these are the straight dump body trucks. It can be all the way, they're working with the sweeper. Coal patch goes in that truck, gravel. These are the real big workhorses. And then they plow. They just miraculously being, I think that one's a 1993. I mean, that's one of the problems that we have here is we're holding on to stuff. So if you look at these trucks right now, that truck right now a new truck's going for about $150,000, $160,000. In 1993, that truck probably went for, I'm gonna guess, $50,000. And we keep running everything right into the ground till it's not worth anything. So when we're getting rid of stuff now, we're getting $100 for it, a backhoe that cost us $125,000 years ago, we got $4,000 for.
Hold
I
on,
just think that's a mistake.
Mike, hold on. Laura, you had a question?
So, why didn't we just throw this in with the last? Why didn't we just like slide H25 in with what we just bonded for?
Because it was $147,000 we didn't have.
We bonded for all the other stuff we gave them,
Didn't bond, did we?
didn't we?
The $734,000 is a DPW equipment. That's coming down now. We'll be paying temporary interest on that in 2021's budget. And DPW equipment, it's on a 5-year amortization schedule to pay off. So I think that's a question for the administration,
Yes.
because the administration would prioritize, perhaps and I can't speak for them, but the decision might be, okay, let's go for the rescue, let's go for the fire truck, we'll do some pieces of equipment here. I don't know if the administration is planning on doing a rollout in 2021 for like, okay, let's do the next phase of equipment. My question, which only because I'm trying to think debt service in my head at the same time as you're talking of a $147,000 piece of equipment. Do you have for these 4 pieces of equipment, I know you're not gonna have it today, H25, H29, H18, and G2, what your annual maintenance cost is to keep these operational and on the road? Not only through your budget, but what, because they're used for plowing, what you have to use from the allowable deficit from snow and ice. Is that something you might be able to have pull together? Because I'm wondering, like, are you basically just paying a little bit more on the maintenance cost, and then should you, I don't think you'd cover the $500,000 in a note, do you know what I mean, equal to that, but it would be interesting to me to evaluate. You're saying we keep them, we run them into the ground, we maintain them as best we can. Are we throwing good money after bad?
I actually started that when I took over the job 2 years ago. Here's where the problem comes in. My annual budget for a truck leaving my yard to get work done, so my mechanics downside, is only $6,900 a year.
Mm-hmm.
So, and as soon as I bring a truck to Minuteman or any other place, as soon as it pulls into that garage door, it's $500, I'll look at it.
Yeah.
That's the starting. So here's the problem with doing that, because I believe in that too. And then coming up with, geez, this truck's really costing us this much money, and we're better off paying a monthly fee to get rid of that, because it's exceeded. The problem with that is, it's because of the talented guys I have in the garage that are able to keep these things on the road. I mean, I got a welder fabricator that can make anything your heart would desire, and he does it to keep these trucks running. If we were not able to provide that service in-house, and I had to bring that out to be professionally welded or fabricated or whatever, we're talking thousands and thousands of dollars. I mean, this guy worked at General Boat, so he really, I've showed Kate some of the guy can perform miracles with stuff, so it's very hard to do that, because they've reached a point in time now where it's hard for me to do a cost analysis. But there will be on all the equipment I have there that's in good shape, I am keeping a log like that to try to, sometimes it opens your eyes to something you don't even see. You know, I got a lot of equipment, I don't see everything, you know. But it's a good point. I mean,
Maybe you
I'm
can
just
take into
curious.
consideration his time that he spends on these trucks.
you know, and the amount of time that they have to put into keeping these trucks on the road, but it's not as much now because of you guys, you know, agreeing to the CIP plan and getting us new equipment coming in soon. But the amount of time you gotta spend to keep that old junk running, I don't have the time to do the maintenance on the other stuff that I should be doing.
Well, and the guy that's doing all the work could be doing something else, I
Right,
would assume.
right, so it's almost a catch-22, I mean, we gotta, you know, I think,
So we'll just add his salary into it, and then we'll have the numbers to say, let's just get a new
His salary.
truck. Listen, I'm just trying to be creative.
I
here.
can't wait to ask other departments these same questions about their vehicles and their mechanics, because they're not doing what his mechanics are doing.
But I think what we need from the Department of Public Works is similar to what we get from the police department and the fire department. And that is that they know when their vehicles are going to be hitting that maintenance overload. And so they're planning way ahead, 10 years out, on replacing vehicles before they get to that point. And it's a little different when you're racing down a road at 100 miles an hour in a police car than when you're driving a dump truck plowing snow, but you've got the exact same problem. that's fire department and the police department, and getting that fleet rejuvenated. So it needs a plan and it needs a budget. And if it's not gonna be budgeted, then it has to be a rolling bond that $781,000 went out last year, 500,000 goes out this year, 600,000 goes out next year, so that they're only 5-year bonds, but you're winding up getting your fleet updated. So that, I think, is where the DPW has to get, the same place that the police department and the fire department are in a vehicle replacement plan. The Vector truck is too much of an impact on your department. I don't see that as being something that we would even consider, in spite of the fact that the Conservation and Planning Department wants you to have it. You're not prepared for it. You're so busy trying to drain the swamp, getting bit by alligators, that the Vector truck is,
Snakes.
it's an oasis. It's a mirage. It's not real.
Yep.
So, I mean, I'll talk to Nick and I'll talk to Gary, but I think that's gonna get dropped from the urgent list until there's a bigger plan for you to come up with a storm water, some storm drain maintenance unit, and that's down the road.
What we're being mandated, I said, they started NIPD's, basically, they started NIPD's 15 years ago. That's when they told these
It's a
towns.
government mandate with no funding.
And you're absolutely right, but for 15 years, and now finally they said, you know what, now we are enacted it.
Let's
but
take
it's been
Deb's
another-
question.
I only thought of this because of the group behind you that's next. What impact, if any, do you know are your vehicles impacted at all by the green communities, hybrids, clean energy, any of that kind of stuff? Do you know? I have no idea.
What effect is it going to have?
Well, yeah, I've been recently made aware of, you know, we have to buy hybrids going forward, or once we're a green community, right? And
You
once
have to, but
Right.
some of the impact of certain vehicles are exempt, but others would have to, based on what the mayor explained to me. I might have misunderstood him, but
Well, my vehicle, the one I just ordered, will be the first hybrid in the city of Attleboro, Ford Explorer.
dump trucks, do they come in hybrids?
No.
Okay, so
Those
those
are
might.
exempt.
Derek's
Those
shaking
are
his head at
totally
me.
exempt.
Okay, so that's sort of my fundamental question. Some of your pieces of equipment are exempt from that type of, okay.
So when it goes to green, let me tell you, all police cruisers, all fire trucks, all DPW equipment except for admin vehicles are exempt.
Okay, the emergency
They
vehicles
call
are
it,
exempt.
all the emergencies are
Okay.
exempt. They wish the police would think about going over to hybrids, but they don't wanna cross that, they don't wanna cross that road and make it a mandate on them.
Okay,
So those are all exempt.
okay.
One last question.
Sure.
Have you looked into the leasing of dump trucks?
Leasing a what?
Dump trucks?
They don't actually work that way.
There's no leasing program for
It's a
dump
lease
trucks?
to own.
Lease to own.
It's a lease to own. When I was in Rehoboth, I had they are very frugal with their money over there, and take great pride in it. So I saved up an allotment each year in Chapter 90 to try to put aside, because our equipment was going down too. Specifically, we had Ford F800s, just like the ones we're replacing in Attleboro. The only thing you can get for a loan for those is they have it, and that the state will agree by using Chapter 90 money, was at 3 years. And you pay, basically, you're paying a truck a year, but they're taking that out of your Chapter 90 allotment, you know what I mean? So that's the only, so, there's no such thing as leasing and giving them back a dump truck.
Right.
They don't allow that. I did check into that, though.
One last question?
Okay, one
Mr.
last
Jackson?
question. Can we, or should we discuss on the first page of Public Works on 78, the construction and needs that he has here under urgent?
I thought that,
Or no?
I avoided that because, number one, it's a bond. It's a, $2,300,000 issue.
That's what I
And so,
saw.
because that's gonna take a whole separate track in communications to the council, I thought that I would just put that aside right now
Okay.
and not discuss it.
Boss,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you, Mike.
You're welcome, thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
So we're gonna move on to the health department, and the health department is on page 45. Welcome, health department. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Terrific. Nice to see you. Pull up another chair. There you go.
Nice to see you.
Welcome back. So in the capital improvement plan, you've got in here a SUV for to replace a current vehicle, a Dodge Caravan.
Right.
Is the Dodge Caravan spending a lot of time in the garage maintenance shed getting repaired?
It is not. It actually is, mechanically it's okay, but it is a rust bucket. That's really the issue. When the last year, when our public health nurse brought the vehicle in for its annual inspection, they were basically, our mechanic had told her that this is it. You know, it will not pass inspection.
So you're in dire straits on this unit.
Yeah.
And you might be a candidate for a hybrid.
Yeah.
I knew you were gonna say that.
You
I
knew
just
that.
knew it
You
was
knew
gonna
that was
come right
coming.
off your lips.
I did want to say, Mr. Chairman, that since the health department put this request in, it's our understanding that the administration, the mayor, has been working to work with the health department and another department to give us. So I guess I'm saying here tonight that we may receive that and may withdraw this request before.
Okay.
If we that would be acceptable to us.
Happy to hear that, because there's no money. We're gonna move on to the other subject that's in your plan on the solid waste recycling upgrade. Even though it's a number 2, you don't have any urgent items other than the vehicle. So because you're here, and because this solid waste recycling center is such a popular spot in the city, we're gonna bend the rules a little bit and talk about a non-urgent project. What are your plans down there?
Well, first I should start off by saying that we approached this, the request for the recycling upgrade. The health department did ask for it to be a priority for 2021.
You did.
Yes, and I believe since then somehow it's got to you folks as a priority too, but we did have it as a priority one.
That's
Interesting.
Okay. So I don't know if that's a typo or whatnot. It's, so this is
So we have the power to change.
So it really doesn't matter what you ask for.
Right.
It just comes down to us in a different way. I never knew that.
I honestly don't know what transpired, but.
Let's
but we
consider it
did-
as an urgent project then. Why
So-
is it urgent?
To give you a little bit of a history, if I may, this has been a request, I believe, that has been sent down to your body for a very long time. I've been your agent now for about 7 years, and I inherited this request. So this has been something that I would say maybe even a decade that the health department has been asking for this. So Jessica was kind enough to take some pictures. Is it okay if I approach you and give you
Sure,
these
sure.
pictures?
And Adam, I don't know if you were here or not when I wrote a plan for Kevin Dumas about this facility and the gold mine that was sitting in that giant pile of compost. Were you here?
I was here, yes.
You were here.
Yes, I am aware of that.
Has that gotten any further consideration?
You did go through consideration. It was a very good suggestion, we had felt. One of the issues, we actually took after your suggestion, we took a tour of a similar facility in another.
Lexington?
Lexington, yes.
Quite a facility.
It's quite a facility.
I went there
And-
myself to check it out.
Okay, so you know it was
I
quite
do.
a facility, very well managed, very
It's
well.
a profitable, money-making enterprise.
Correct, and the issue that we had found at that particular time was that it may have been 6 of one of half a dozen of the other in our facility, because number one, we didn't have the space that Lexington had. And also, we did not necessarily have the type of training and people that were in place in Lexington. So there would have been, at least for initial costs, there would be a tremendous expense, we felt, to get that up, to have that kind of a nice facility. Although, I don't know how that would be today, but the size of the facility or the land needed would not change to really make it work.
So the biggest issue was that I think I estimated there were 440,000 yards, I forget what the number was, 4,000 yards of compost sitting in the lot at the time, which has value because landscaping, this is all from memory, we're selling it for like $6 a yard to the public, but the issue was that our compost has everything in it that whatever delivers with their leaves, and that it needs to be ground, and it needs to be aged properly in order for it to be worth $6 a cubic yard. And the machine to grind that is like $200,000 then, probably $300,000 now.
Probably.
And we had a relationship with a vendor that would bring in a grinder every year to grind the material so that it would compost properly. Has anything changed?
Not really, no. The one thing that would change is that the time, I think that your suggestion was very timely. And I don't want to claim to be an expert, but I don't think the market for those materials are the same.
Right.
I really think there's not. In speaking with other landscapers, and Jess might be able to weigh in on this too, or speaking with some of the haulers or the grinder contractors, it's getting more costly to actually do grinding and take care of the materials that we take in, and this is something we may speak to your body at a future date about. To offset those costs, we would use some of the value of what we would have there in the compost piles. That value's not there, they don't want it.
Yep.
And these are landscapers who are in the business of, at one time, they would have loved to have taken that material and do exactly what you wanted to do and do it at their own facilities, but they don't seem to want it. That could change, but if we're talking about today, it wouldn't be, I can pretty feel confident it wouldn't be as equitable to try to do something like that.
So, the pictures that you pass around show that the pavement is degrading and needs to be repaved.
Yes.
And you were talking also about a,
I don't even
It's
think
never,
there's,
I'm sorry,
there's
it's
no
never been
pavement
paved.
at all.
There's no pavement.
It's never been paved.
It's
Right.
dirt.
Right.
Puddles. Lots and lots of puddles.
We do a lot of maintenance, I can't give you an exact dollar amount, but then we do get help from the other department, DPW, and so we are able to do some things in-house, but it is a constant upkeep out there.
and so how old is this $64,000 figure?
That figure is pretty recent.
It is.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, in years past, there was actually a higher number there, I think 66,000. But we're about $2,000 less, at least in this year.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask him two
Yes.
questions?
Yes.
I'm a frequent user of the a dump of leaves and stuff. I have two questions. Number one, given the nature of the materials there and what happens there, how does pavement? I'm just thinking of runoff. It seems to me it's a better idea that the water goes directly into the ground than runoff on pavement. So how would pavement on the side where the compost material is? What does it do for the situation besides just make the road smoother? How is it an improvement other than that?
Well, it certainly would be an improvement of ease of use.
Yeah.
For the consumer, for the people that use that roadway.
Yeah.
The people that would
Yeah.
get their sticker, come down, use the facility, go to the compost center, or be on the program. Also, the maintenance of it is something that we, for lack of a better term, we don't have like a road maintenance crew. And we are constantly having to go down there and rely on other entities to keep that roadway functional. Free of potholes, free of ponding.
Okay. Would you consider ever bifurcating the lot so that perhaps, I'm thinking the side where the other materials, the metals and that stuff, that seems to me a better candidate, if you will, for paving than where the trucks back up. I'm just thinking when I go there, I'm just throwing stuff over the back of my car and I'm out. I don't care what that's potholes. It doesn't bother me. I kind of expect it in that kind of place. But have you ever thought about splitting the project in that way and prioritizing one area over another?
So we're hoping to pave the road that the circular area where the
Okay.
recycling center is, not the compost side, but the
Okay.
area leading up to the,
Okay,
so
perfect.
where
That's
you
what I was
drive in
thinking.
before you go into the compost.
Okay.
That's what we're hoping.
Oh, then forgive me. Okay.
So, the front part, when you go in, is paved. Was that paved using state grants?
I wasn't here then, but I would probably have to say, I feel pretty confident, no, because that's not a public roadway per se. And I think that the administration did ask that question, and I think the answer was that you couldn't use Chapter 90. I know Ms. Gould is here, and she would probably know better than me, and I don't want to speak for her, but I believe that we would not have been able to use that money for that roadway. At least we couldn't in today's terms.
I don't know, but I think you're right. I typically Chapter 90, I don't believe is an allowable. That's not an allowable use because it's not a public way.
That is-
There
that-
might be
that
some
was-
exemption. I don't think, though, I think most of the construction and work was done, and this goes back a long time. I think Nancy Today was here. It might even predate Cheryl Perry in your position, Jess. That a lot of that was done piecemeal throughout your revolving fund. Capital improvements were done over time, which is what I think you're suggesting here.
So I have a question through you to the controller, that we have a solid waste rate that we pay for trash. Is it possible for the health department to slip in $64,000 into the rate?
So Alan and I met on the two items here. I think that was part of the potential plan, as he's considering everything that will impact fiscal '21 and the rate. He's looking at all sorts of things, and the $4 would equate to just a little over $4 per unit on the rate, which essentially equals $1 a quarter for this capital improvement in the revolving fund.
So I would recommend that, whereas the mayor was here just about an hour before you saying there's no money. So I think for you to get your paving done, and I would support this if it were to come down to the council, add it to the rate, because it's being applied to the people who use the field.
And we appreciate that, and I think that would be a fair way, and it would be a one-time hit on, well, in practicality, it would be a one-time hit on the rate.
Right.
It would not be reoccurring.
Right.
To that point, I think one of the discussion points that has not been resolved in our conversation, and certainly this has to go through the administration to see if he would be in support of adding that to the rate going forward, what side of the rate it would be on. That the result of where the recommendation would be budgeting, and so it would be part of the rate, right, presented as part of the rate. The question fundamentally would it be presented as part of the rate in the general fund, or would it be part of the rate in the revolving fund? The rate is the rate, and it ends up in the same place. The difference is, if it's in the revolving fund, you actually have to collect it before he can spend it.
Okay.
So if Alan said, I want it to be part of the rate, but I'm not planning on actually doing the paving until the spring of 2021, which is the third quarter of fiscal '21, right? Then it could potentially be on the revolving side part. But if Alan said, you know what, realistically, if I'm gonna put this as part of the rate, and the city treasurer's office, it takes into consideration the cash flow aspects, and that is budgeted in the general fund portion of the rate, he may be able to accomplish that earlier in the fiscal year. So just for your benefit of where it's put, that's something that they would consider as they present the budget. And when they do those types of analyses of expenses associated with the rate, part of what they think about and we discuss internally is, as a practical matter, when does it need to be spent? When do we have to sign a contract? When do we have to issue a purchase order? So that that's all done in the planning process. I just don't want you to see it if it potentially comes down in the rate and it's not where you expect it to be. It's likely to be wherever it lands for a reason directly related to cash flow, planning, where it is. Because under 4453E1/2, the revolving fund statute, which is our ordinance 20 and the statute, the money has to be there. So if you plan it as part of the rate, you'd have to collect it all. You'd have to have the cash on hand to spend it. So a $64,000 hit, if they asked me, I'm gonna say, might wanna consider putting it on the general government budget side. So you have the money and can get it done, knowing that the collection process would occur throughout the year.
He stands less of a chance of getting it out of the general budget fund.
Well, it would be part of the local receipt for solid waste. So if you didn't have it there, if it wasn't on the general fund side, it's just when you do that particular vote for the revolving fund, how much of the rate as developed is going to be earmarked for the revolving fund as to the general fund.
That's something you need to work out.
Yeah, I
so
just
that
don't want
we
you
can
to-
make that decision when the revolving funds come down.
Okay,
And you'll need to advise us on what you've decided,
okay.
okay? Do you have any other questions for the committee? Does anyone have any questions for the health department? Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Parks, and Parks is on page 52.
Hello.
Welcome, how are you?
Not bad yourself?
Good. So,
Big ticket tonight.
we have funded your chip truck with the grapple arm. That's top item on 52.
I know. Thank you
That comes
very
off the
much.
list.
Appreciate that.
Did we buy the Mobach chipper?
We did not. No.
We did not. And again, we're seeing repairing the fencing 4 years ago.
Not since I've been here. So maybe before then.
Yeah.
But it's in rough shape. It's all rotting out. So we've been.
So are you aware that there's a trust fund?
I
that's
do.
Designated
There's
specifically for
there's
that
about
fountain?
$7,000 in that trust fund. So.
So we're a little short.
Yeah, a little short.
Like $63,000 short.
Yeah.
And growing.
Do we need to close the Wolfenden fountain from the public
No.
until it gets repaired?
No, it's accessible now and it's safe now, but the structure of the fence is rotting away, so it's only a matter of time before we can't make these, small repairs to keep it, safe.
Okay, but
And the concrete, we've had some areas that we've had to go and temporarily patch, so it's not a tripping hazard and whatnot.
so Mobach chipper, Wolfenden fountain,
Chipper.
the chipper definitely takes
Yes.
priority. Yes, that's what I thought. And we talked about getting the vet building re-roofed. We've been talking about it all year,
Yep.
and I don't even see it on your list anymore.
I have
It's on the zoo
animal
separate from the
treatment
park.
facility.
Yep,
Yep.
That one.
Yep.
The garage, right?
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Tell us what's going on with the garage.
I have some pricing for a standard asphalt and metal roof. It's developing a lot of leaks. It's something that we've been temporarily patching for now, but the main leak portion is where we store all the grain. So we've had some instances where we've lost some product because heavy rains have leaked through and destroyed what we had. So we're taking as many precautions as we can, but it's something that's not sustainable.
So,
I do believe that was on our list last
Yeah,
year.
it was.
There were
And
several of us, I think.
in,
right.
what concerns me is about the whole maybe being found non-compliant. Is that a real possibility?
It could be a possibility when we go up for our AZA accreditation next year.
So, last year we were talking about, we thought maybe the purchase of the Highland Park was gonna yield you some space and some buildings for maintenance, but it seems like the school department got in there before you did.
Well, that we've used it for maintenance of the park equipment, but for the zoo, it's not really a viable option. They need something on site that they can access.
Right.
So that's where this problem is. This is a zoo related issue.
Right. And it has to be at the zoo.
Yeah.
Got it. Yes.
$23,000?
I actually got a price for a lot less than that.
What's your current price?
13.5.
13.5?
And I have
Listed
a
10
few
last.
others coming in. I know you asked about the metal roofing. That seems a little unrealistic. The first price I got was $100,000, which I think is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. I did my whole house.
Yeah,
for
well, that's what
35.
I'm getting more prices, but for a baseline, at least we know around 13.5 to get the whole building done, which I think is fairly reasonable considering prevailing wage and all of that.
And what's the material on that roof?
Just standard asphalt shingles, it's like you would have on your home.
For the 30-year life cycle?
25 years.
25?
Yeah.
And then, so my other question, obviously you're quoting it with prevailing wage.
Yes.
13.5.
Mm-hmm.
Do you reasonably think that could be absorbed in your Capron Park Zoo revolving fund?
I believe that could, yeah.
I do too.
I'm sensing sarcasm.
A little, but I don't know. Have both because the next one down is the urgent nocturnal economies of scale. If you're down $9,500 from your estimate for
Yeah.
that, did you scope them both out at the same time, or
They were scoped. This one, the animal treatment garage was scoped out more recently than the nocturnal building. I know the nocturnal building, a portion of it was done prior to this, and then there's another portion that's leaking.
So maybe whoever quoted you the 13.5, we could cut him a deal, and
Same time.
so maybe we could get like a deal.
Yeah, package deal.
Unencumbered in your revolving fund, and I know the revolving fund is cyclical in nature, driven off, obviously by people attending and all that kind of stuff. But your current available budget, you might have to address your cap with the council, depending on where you are, if you were doing a capital improvement like that, but.
Yeah, right now, if we did both roofs, we would be far away from what our cap is. We'd be in good shape.
And you think you might be able to absorb it?
Yeah.
So.
But it's something, I don't, doing too much at once, I don't want to eat into, that capital we have in reserve. That's my one fear, but the stuff needs to be done.
Yeah, and if the roof is leaking, it's
Yeah.
gonna get fixed.
Right, I mean.
A lot of this stuff seems to have been put off for a while, which we need to address now, so.
But I would hate to see you not make an expenditure of, let's say 26.5 is accurate, right? And 13.5 is the one that you have now. A $40,000 expenditure when you rolled over $1.2 million last year plus, and you have grain that, I mean, at some point, the $40,000 might be better off spent than keeping it in reserve for the rainy day 9 months down the road in a seasonal cycle. That's just me, but I'm just part of the conversation.
I'm sorry.
So on the animal, because I need to address one thing before you go, and we're running out of time. Replacing the roof of the animal treatment facility garage, revolving account.
Yeah.
Replacing the roof in a nocturnal building, revolving account.
Yeah.
Back up to the maintenance building for you.
Yes.
Which is a 50 by 120 foot building that is essentially close to worthless.
Yeah, it leaks during heavy rains with puddles forming. It's terrible to heat because it's a tall building.
So you've got it as a one priority.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to be a realist here, and I know that.
Yes.
The maintenance building.
Page 53.
Page 53, phase 1 and phase 2. Have you even started this process to find out what the phase 1's gonna cost?
Not yet, no. It's something that I know we need, but I don't know what the priority would be with the city. I know there's a lot more going on where it could be thrown by the wayside.
So if, let's say, the Army Reserve Center became available suddenly, could you use down to, does that building does not need to be at Cape Horn Park. If that building was at the Army Reserve.
The building could be anywhere.
Right.
I mean,
so if a building
we don't
became
want to buy a
available.
money pit though, that, something we'd have to look into.
Okay, good. That's what I wanted to know. Do you have any other questions for Derek? Yes?
With the revolving fund, what do you typically use that for?
Yeah.
Like
Well,
when you talk about like rainy, when she was saying like rainy
The
day.
revolving fund basically pays zoo director, assistant director salary, a couple zookeeper salaries, the vet salary, and then it buys all our material for the zoo through the course of the fiscal year. So any expenditure we have to keep that zoo running comes from that account.
But can you explain to me what I don't know what word you used when you said it was left? Like you rolled over.
It's a revolving fund?
So when you say rolled over,
Revolving
you
fund.
paid all those salaries and then rolled over 1.2.
Out of a revolving fund that this particular account is a revolving fund that you have to have the money in order to spend it.
Yeah.
So given the expenses that the superintendent just sort of highlighted, because salary comes out of there, let's pretend for simplicity's sake, and I don't have the right page in front of me, I don't think.
So if we didn't make a dime, we need to make sure we have enough money in that account to fund
pay
us
those
for the year.
salaries.
But the amount of money that rolled over from fiscal 2019 into fiscal 2020 was almost the entire year's worth of expenses. that you'd need in 2020, if not greater,
So
right?
you're ahead by all your expenses.
Right,
almost-
but you're ahead because you rolled over the money.
Right.
Your revenues are trailing your expenditures during fiscal 2020. So right now in 2020, you've spent $107,000 more than you've taken in. But you rolled over $1.2 million. So my point is, Derek's saying, you know, I need to make sure that I have enough money for what I'm gonna need, and I'm like, okay, I grant you that. But when you're rolling over $1.2 million, you don't want the place falling down around you, so you can't have an animal in the exhibit. So I just don't think personally, which doesn't count for much, but $40,000 investment into the infrastructure, I think is money well spent when you have $1.2 million available to you rolling over. That being said, they're down revenue to expenses.
Right.
They collect a lot of money. It's seasonal, right? You have to have good weather. People have to go to the zoo. April really matters. April vacation matters. February vacation matters. A beautiful Saturday or
Saturdays and
Sunday.
Sundays in the spring
Right.
and fall matter.
Sunny days matter. I mean, it truly is a department that the weather has a great impact on visitors to the zoo. You know, so they consider that as they kind of look at it. They don't want to deplete their revolving fund. If you deplete it, then we're going to be sitting here saying, well, how do we pay the folks? But
All set?
Yep.
You got an
May I ask
understanding
you a
of
quick
that?
question?
Yes.
This may be obvious. Is the zoo, to either one of you, is the zoo ordinarily a revenue generator for the city? Do we actually make
No.
money from the zoo?
No.
Lose or break even, or?
certain divisions within the department break even. There are expenses borne by the overall city that are related to the zoo, but for the most part, the zoo covers its internal expenses,
Yeah.
including minor capital like this.
Right.
So last year you spent
Yeah, we
money on
had
the,
to do a boiler in that same
Right.
treatment hospital. That failed.
They-
So Derek, do you have any questions for the committee?
No, do you have any
Okay.
questions for
Anyone
me?
have questions? Yes?
I just wanted to express, I felt very strongly about this last year, and
Yeah.
I feel it even more strongly now. I think you've got a reasonable deal that hasn't gone up too much from last year.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't wanna spend all of it, you know, both these projects,
Yep.
I would recommend looking at,
But I think looking at both and trying to cut a deal while they're there is
If you
definitely
can,
the
yeah.
smartest thing to do.
So let
I
me know.
think
I'll
what you're
come
hearing
down
tonight
there.
is that you've got the money,
Yeah.
so just go, do it.
go,
You don't need it, you don't
good to
need
the
it.
animals.
Doesn't need a
Do it.
recommendation from this committee.
Do it for the
He's
animals.
got the money, he's just gonna go get it done. Thank you, Derek.
Do you want to do animal control while I'm here?
You just need a vehicle, right?
Yes.
The one that just got in an accident?
Yeah, that one. And I want to go with the Transit Connect van. It's what a lot of other municipalities are using. It's a little smaller, easier to drive for some of our ACOs. And
The vehicle that you have now,
60,
what's the repairs, annual repairs on that vehicle now? Not including,
it
not including the
depends. It
accident.
depends. We had to do a manifold on it last year, so that was $1,000. And then your general maintenance, but it's an 07, so you're getting up there now.
So there's no money this year.
I've heard.
Okay. I don't think I need to say anything else. Thank you for being here. We're gonna move on to planning. Planning's on page 62.
can I ask a question? I know it's late.
If it's about capital improvements and not about budget, yes.
Well, we were
No,
supposed
it's
to talk
about
about
your
his
animal
vehicle.
control, because I didn't think to even look, to be honest with you, at the.
What page
No,
are you
on
on?
animal control, page 60, you have 2 ones. Paved parking area at animal shelter and construct sidewalk at animal shelter.
Neither one of them are urgent.
So, not worrying about them.
No,
Okay.
there's no money.
Well, I just want to point one thing out, because you were part of this back in the day. You have the animal shelter building fund, Fund 2618,
Yes,
that has $46,000 in it.
bingo. There's your van.
You haven't,
it's
animal
not the
shelter.
building. It's not
It's
the
restricted to
building.
the animal shelter, not
So-
the van. But
So why can't the animal control officer who works in the animal shelter tap into that fund for his vehicle?
because
It's for the
the
shelter
municipal
only.
council established that fund for improvements to the animal shelter building when we drafted the ordinance and when you set aside the fee up front, so that when the building that you brand new constructed had issues in the future, you wouldn't need. So I believe you guys would be within your right and purview to amend the ordinance and do changes to the ordinance so that you could use it for other things. I just wanted to let you know, like, the animal control parking area would be probably related to the animal shelter and certainly the construction of a sidewalk at the animal shelter, if those are around the building and the perimeter and stuff like that, you've put money aside so that maybe it's not urgent today because it's 2021 and it's listed as a 1, but I don't know, you guys were talking earlier about the longer we wait, the more expensive it becomes.
How much did you say was in there?
You have, right now, $46,476 in the fund.
How does that get funded?
Late fees for the
Dog licensing.
dog licensing, and you only authorized $15,000 to be expended in fiscal 2020. But I just wanted to make sure that that was at least on the horizon, or
Well,
back of your mind.
you know, that's why you're here. This is very good.
So,
You're earning your money.
Derek,
Yes.
you're gonna ask the council to increase your spending limit for 21 so that you can get these 2 projects done out of the animal shelter revolving account.
Okay.
And I believe the council will approve that. And then we don't have to deal with it in our capital improvements message to the mayor.
All right.
Okay? Thank you. We're ready for planning.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Plan is on page 62.
Hi, Gary.
Hi, Gary.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hi, Ray. Thank you.
Gary,
Why
earlier
is
in
he
the
even
night,
here? He only has 2s.
yeah, earlier in the night, we were talking about runoff water systems and new developments and bonding and the possibility that someone could develop a big tract of land with retaining ponds or retention ponds or stormwater runoff drains or these new, what's it called?
What's that?
Scepter.
What's that?
Lids?
What?
Lids, low impact
Scepter.
development.
What's that Bob Catanacci 3-pond thing? What do they call those?
It's a 4-bay. One's a 4-bay.
4-bay?
4-bay.
Is that the scepter thing?
No, that's a storm scepter. That's subsurface. That's under the ground.
All right, talk to me like I'm 5.
Well, it's under the ground. It's a structure. It's for groundwater recharge.
What's the one that's on Ritchie Road? What's that called?
Well, Ritchie Road is Meadow Sweet Farms. That was approved like 25 years ago. So we talked
Nichols.
Stonehill Estates.
Yes. What's that called? Those
Those basins.
basins?
Yeah. Well, the one right on Oak Hill Meadow Way, right on the roadway, right. So if you go up Ritchie Road and you take a right,
Right onto Nichols.
right, immediately on the left-hand side, there's a bit, that's called a 4-bay. Then there's a retention basin after that, then a retention basin after that, and then there's a retention basin to the right of that, along the Rehoboth town line.
Okay.
So that's a 4-bay. What that does is, as the runoff comes off the street and the properties, all the heavy suspended solids, they get suspended until the water goes down and it just saturates into the ground. As it rains again, those heavy particles stay below. When the water rises, it takes all the suspended solids out. And then you'll notice on top of that 4-bay, there's a riprap. There's that stone. It looks like a bluish stone, about 10, 15 pounds of scarabus stone. That when it tops over, that's clean water that would top over and go into the next basin. As it keeps raining, it just keeps topping over to the next one. But the purpose of the 4-bay is to trap all the suspended solids, the heavy particles. Every couple of years, you need to come in and skim off the bottom of that. There's gonna be a dirty sand, a soil, grubby, you have to skim that off. And we require that that all gets cleaned out before we'll accept the street. So we'll go in.
That's what
we gotta
we're
make sure
talking about.
all the water mains are charged. We make sure that all the stormwater, the piping is all rooted out, cleaned out. What's the word I'm looking for? Can't think of the word right now. Just all pumped out, cleaned out. All the basins, if they're retention, they're all skimmed off because during construction, a lot of things go in there, no matter how meticulous one is. clean the catch basins or whatnot. It fills up. But we've been doing this for a long time. Everything is cleaned out, skimmed up, so when they hand it over to us, it's like brand new. And then it's incumbent upon us to maintain those. So the structure right off, even though it's an indentation, it looks like a stormwater basin, is called a forebay.
What kind of equipment is used to clean those, to maintain those? What is it? What's the machinery that does that? What is it? Do you know?
Well, mainly it's gonna be, lawn mowers and, what do they call those?
Weed whacker?
What's that?
Weed whacker?
Weed whacker, thank you, I'm sorry, I'm kinda toasted
But we
at this
don't have
point.
to skim, we don't have to do anything in the,
Absolutely we do, we don't have that, it's almost like a vacuum cleaner.
is that the vector thing?
No, that's a Vector truck. What a Vector truck is, unlike a clamshell, when you lift out the
Right, I know what it is.
drops down and pulls that out, you always see all that grub. Okay, what a Vector truck is, it's like a big suction tube. It just goes in,
Right.
you direct it with a camera, and it just pulls out all the filth and everything, completely contained within that vacuum. It's air sealed, so nothing spits out on the sides. We don't have, as far as I understand, the machine that actually sucks that material out. So when we need to do it, I suspect we have to go out and get a consultant, a contractor to do it. Much like if you drive down Riverfront Drive, Riverfront Road, from Wall Street to Olive Street, on the right-hand side, you're gonna notice that there's black pavement and then a grayish pavement. The grayish pavement where the cars can park is a different kind of pavement. It's pervious pavement. If you were to get a bucket of water and spill right into that, it would just get absorbed. The only way to clean that, you need to clean that every couple of years, is there's a machine, it's almost like a vacuum cleaner. And you put it, it just sucks out all the material. You don't have that machine. So when we need to clean that out, and that's coming up pretty soon, but we just built that a couple of years ago. For that, and for these retention basins, yeah, there's a machine that actually just sucks that
It's the
material
same
out.
machine.
I don't know if it's the same machine. They have machines for different surfaces. One is asphalt, or we call it pervious pavement. One is bricks. The other one is literally soil and grass. So they all have different types of screens, different types of tolerances of the screen, different types of power to pull those out. It all depends. But it's not the same. They're similar, but they're not the same machine. So if the point is you get one that could do all of them, I doubt that that's the case.
You okay?
Not
But,
really.
but it's not a storm scepter. So storm scepter is a completely different man-made structure that's under the ground.
All right, so these basins that we were just talking about.
One is a
that we-
forebay, and the other one's a
Forebay.
retention basins.
Okay, those will, once they're turned over to the city, they'll need something that DPW will use to maintain those.
Yeah, and we have them now too, so those aren't gonna be the first ones. Those aren't gonna be the first ones.
And how do we maintain the other ones? Okay, well, anyway, I've taken up enough time, I'll sit here quietly now.
Is that,
Along the same lines for a follow-up, if you don't mind. So, the construction of the forebay, the basin, all of that stuff, could you just tell me, that's part of the approved subdivision?
Correct.
That's through the planning process?
Correct.
That ultimately the bond, if it's constructed correctly, performed properly, the bond, whether it's cash or otherwise, would be released through the planning department after review from.
Through the planning board.
Pardon me?
Through the planning
Through
board.
the planning board after consultation with DPW to make sure certain benchmarks have been made.
And inspected, satisfactorily completed, signed off, and then a recommendation is made to the planning board to reduce the bond amount commensurate to the amount
Yep.
of work that was completed.
The cost of a subdivision, not the bond, because ultimately after performance, that would be released, assuming everything is done perfectly. In the cost of originally constructing the subdivision and the plans and that kind of stuff, is there a fee associated with, there's gonna be a retention pond, so because there's a retention pond, we charge X number of dollars because we know as a city we're gonna have long-term maintenance?
So let me understand your question. After the project is completed, signed off, all the funds are released, the streets are accepted, does the developer of that subdivision put into an account with the city an amount of money that we then use to maintain that basin over a period of time?
I've never seen that happen.
Is that what you're asking me?
I'm actually asking, and
On the front
prior to
end.
that, as part of the permitting process, is there a fee associated with the installation of the detention pond, forebay, whatever that, so a forebay may cost X number of dollars to maintain. Like, do we charge for that type of thing going into the city? Because we're gonna ultimately have to pay for the maintenance.
When you say charge, I'm not sure, I'm
A
not.
fee, is there a fee associated with the installation of that in a subdivision?
So aside from the bond, let's say the bond is $1 million to finish that subdivision.
Right.
Above and beyond that, to allow a developer to put in a structure, whatever it costs, say $30,000, that there's a fee paid to the city for that separate and above the bond.
Yes, because the bond is not.
Right, it goes back to
It
the
goes
developer.
back
Right,
to the
right, right.
developer, but the developer is developing something that has a long-term
Right.
cost to the city.
Right.
So that was the question I think that we were trying to ask earlier. It might not be appropriate
So that's
for
what I
this
was-
venue.
The question is
That's
whether
what
or
I'm
not it's
asking, is
legal.
there it's not so much do they give us money for the structure, are they paying us money to maintain that structure once it's done? And the answer is no.
No, because the city is receiving tax dollars from the people who are living on the street.
Right, the argument would be then, okay, now we're generating tax revenue. However, City of Attleboro or any community in the Commonwealth, you choose to use those funds, that's up to you. So what we're essentially talking about is an exaction. There is a cost to the community for that subdivision. Once there are school-age children, for all general government, the theoretical argument is that we're paying you taxes now. The house, excise tax to the vehicles. That's up to you, Attleboro, how you use those funds, whether it's to maintain stormwater, your education, so forth and so on. Clearly, it's not enough, and that's why we increase taxes over time. Some of it's because of the appreciation of the value of the property there, so there is an inherent increase, so therefore you pay taxes, but there are also artificial increases. We as a community choose to increase taxes because you need more revenue, because your cost of electricity and anything else goes up.
So Gary,
So the point is, it's the taxes that are generated, theoretically, that are used to then offset that cost. City of Attleboro as a developer, I'm telling you, you use that as you wish.
so 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when the transit-oriented development was being put in, I put in a measure for the transit-oriented district to have a impact fee, and it went down in flames.
Just wrote that down, impact fee for future maintenance.
Right. And I think that's kind of like what we're discussing here. And I think impact fees have not been used in the past. We don't have any impact fees.
Well,
and
because there's no enabling legislation for that.
there is enabling.
There is no enabling legislation that I know.
So we need a home rule exemption.
For a community to do something that's outside the statutes of the Commonwealth, for example, when we accepted all the streets circa 1993, 1994, that process that we implemented to accept those 294 streets, which was about 43 miles, is not the process by which to accept streets. We had special legislation filed by then Representative Stephen Carroll that was signed by Governor Weld at the time that enabled the city of Attleboro on a one-time basis to go do that. So if your comment is that we need to file something like that, I suppose it is. I don't think we've had that experience to do that because I don't think we've ever requested it. So I suspect that's one vehicle to achieve that.
Right.
But there is no enabling legislation now that says for every unit of residential development, the community can charge X dollars because you're taking on that added cost above and beyond the taxes that you're going to receive through, for example, real estate taxes and excise taxes, and then the other receivables for trash and on and on and on, all the other fees that we charge. Above and beyond that, I'm putting a burden on you that we think that additional value is going to be the delta to cover that gap.
Right.
We don't have that, correct?
But there are Commonwealth of Massachusetts communities that do have impact fees.
So they do, and where that fine line is, they do to the point where the entity that gives the money is willing to give it because it's not worth the lawsuit. There's always that tripping point to say, at this point, I'm gonna give you, fine, deny my project, I'll see you in court. We don't do things like that in Attleboro. We don't do things like, we always play by the book, is it might cost us a little more. We don't track in that because we don't strong them. So, do communities get fire trucks? Sure they do. Do communities get Vector trucks? Sure they do. But we don't operate like that. It's always on the up and up. Right there would be a stop gate anyway, but aside from Debbie, wouldn't get past me. So it isn't because we don't do the, I just know how we operate. We just don't operate like that. There are communities that do. Yeah, you want that rezoning? Yeah, we'll think of maybe
So
a
can we move
fire
on?
truck.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I didn't know that
I just didn't know if there was a fee. I
No.
went through the process and I'm not aware of one, so.
You would have flagged that a long time ago. There's no revenue stream coming into the city from a subdivision. I know her and her office well enough to say, Gary, what's this? And we don't do it because they're gonna say that. We don't do it because you can't do it.
Right.
If we could, we'd speak with Debbie to find out, and through the council, the mayor's office, this is some legislation, through the city solicitor, how can we go about, we'll float a test balloon, see if there's any flavor for it, and if there is, we'd come down and probably try to discuss an ordinance and hear it out here and let the chips fall where they may.
Okay, so if we could, move on to, what you put in the capital improvement plan. I saw that we have a comprehensive plan, updating the comprehensive plan by going out to a consultant, and I'm very happy about that. And I thought the $25,000 was a very reasonable figure.
It's more than reasonable.
Yeah, more than reasonable, given that the senior center study was $35,000 last year and less comprehensive than this.
Well, two reasons. First of all, I'm only looking for a statistical update. We're not getting into policies. That's up to the planning board. We always work well with the planning board. If the mayor wants to appoint a committee, we do that in-house. I need a consultant. I don't have the depth, although we have the aptitude and technical capability, just don't have the time. So I don't want to push it off and say, we'll get to it, and keep asking questions when, and we don't get to it. So what I'd rather do is ask for an appropriation. I think $25,000 is enough between a consultant, my staff, I'm still saying we're going to give our staff, and Serped.
So you put it down as a 2.
What page are we on?
We're on page 62.
Yeah, right at the top, right.
Yep, right at the top.
Yep.
And I don't believe the comprehensive plan has been updated for at least 10 years.
No, we adopted it in June 2012.
Okay.
So it's been about 7 years now,
Okay.
7.5 years.
So it's not as old as I thought.
And it is about as young as they get at this point. It's probably in its first third or first quarter. They usually go good 20 years, sometimes they'll push 25. So it's still in its infancy.
Okay. That answers my question.
And the reason why I wanted to do it next year and not ask for it last year, I'm waiting for the census to come out. So there's no point in me in asking to do this in 2019 on projections and speculation and other numbers, mixed numbers, blended numbers. Why not wait one more year? I put it down as a 2. Let's get the actual numbers so we know when we update it in 2020, all the referenceables, the references, the citations, the footnotes are all a function of the U.S. federal census, no questions asked.
Perfect. Excellent.
That was the thought process, or is the thought process.
Good. Anyone have any questions for Gary?
No.
Gary, thank you. Number 1, I can't let you leave that seat without telling you how impressed I am.
My pleasure.
So pleased
Thank you.
that this book is delivered this year on time.
Well, I
Gary,
promise
thank
I
you
would.
so much.
You're welcome. And-
Vicky, we got it on time last year, didn't
No.
Did
I
not.
don't think this is quick.
No.
This is the first time in the history, current history of Attleboro, that we've gotten this book this early.
Because it was always wanted to get pushed out into November, and then once it got to November, then you hit the holidays and everything, is to get free cash numbers down. So Councilor Conti and Mayor Ru had a discussion with me, and I said, look, it's not taking me that long because it's taking me that long. It's been the history of the mayor is wanting to wait for free cash. I have to honor that. You know, it's not Gary's plan, it's the city's plan. So I got direction to do that, which I honored it. So Councilor Conti and Mayor Haru some time ago asked me, can you deliver? And I said, sure I can. I have to rearrange my priorities and workload, but I did. And that's why you got it before the 31st. And now that I got the other one was April and we pushed this one up against it, well, the first one's difficult because they're almost back to back. So now since we made the adjustment time-wise now, I can adjust my workload for this calendar year so that I will hit December 31st without the pressure I had to absorb this year, if you know what I mean.
It's perfect, because finally we get the book early, and the first thing we hear about is we have no money until October. So, you know, you take a one step forward and two steps back, but we're making progress, and I'm determined to make this a better plan and a better part of the administrative function and an integral part of the budgeting process. And I believe it's going to get there. And I firmly, and maybe I'm the guy with the pole looking at a windmill, but I think I can pull this off.
Well, this afternoon, Debbie stopped by my office, and we talked about some of the planning department projects, not philosophically on the overall project. And we agreed, I agreed, absolutely. She said, do you think we could collaborate so I can, I said, absolutely. So it's not a pride thing. We work great with Debbie. If she wants to work with me and I work with her to make this a better product for the next time, absolutely.
Terrific. Thank you very much for being here.
That was it?
That's it. We're done. We're all set.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Gary.
Gary, I appreciate your time again today. And
Yeah,
there's a
of
lot of
course.
work that goes into this, and I know you spent a considerable amount of time going through stuff with me today, so thanks.
Nothing else, really?
Well, there's always more to be said, but there's a lot more to talk about. NIPD's we're not dealing with because that takes a separate meeting and a full council education, and this committee,
And at some point, if you want one, I'll be happy to come down with Nick.
you're going to have
I'll
to.
probably bring our consultant with us.
Yep, you're
'cause
going to
that's
have to. When you
coming
need-
every single year, so there's no more pushing it out. So we're already in it. We've already got 3 contracts with Horsley Witten Group. We've already completed 1 contract. We're in the midst of completing 2 other contracts by the end of this fiscal year. The mayor and, Barry and the mayor's office, Kathy, called to find out what I expect the estimated contract for year 2 to be for FY21. That's in there. And also for the next one coming up, let's not forget SPAC. But I don't put that in as a capital project. That's
Well, we
monitoring, but-
just approved the money for
So no, no,
SPAC. That's through the council already. When you think it's appropriate for you and Nick to come in front of the capital improvement city development, all you have to do is give me a buzz.
Sure.
And I'll schedule it, and I'm
right.
happy to have you.
Very good.
But that is a separate meeting.
Yeah,
You know,
okay.
that is not for this.
I just thought you might have some questions about the priority and all that. And I
No.
did as an urgent, as you know, it's a federal unfunded, a federally unfunded mandate, but because it's federally required, what I do with all the department heads, I apply the same standard to me. I put the same definitions, the fire to my feet. And it's a federal requirement, it's urgent, and that's where I got it. It wasn't because of anything else. I just made it, it meets our agreed upon definitions of urgent, P1, P2, and P3. And I noticed, Council, you said the other ones are all P2. It's just the nature of what I do. You know, fortunately, unfortunately, whatever the case is, it's not like the fire department or the police department where I have life and limb at every single, it's not. So my
Well, we
projects are
started
gonna
all
tend
our
to be like
meetings
that.
tonight with, we have no money, and we're like, okay, great, next.
Yeah,
So we were a little deflated, so I'm like, twos?
Yeah.
Twos are like nothing. No,
Yeah.
I was just giving, I was giving you a
But
hard time,
fortunately,
Gary.
even with twos, we're able to manifest those projects because, as you know, we're great with the grants. So, you know, we don't come here and ask you for $3 million for that, Gary. When you need to spend $1 million on a fire engine, you know, I come in, I need the cash match or some other authorization, which is a percentage of the overall project. We're very fortunate that the projects we work on, vast majority, like Dodgeville Pond, like 98% of that was almost all grant funded.
And we did get you that printer.
Yes, you did. Thank you very much. Absolutely. Yeah, that's
There's always a bright side.
I don't ask for much, but you know,
I
when come a
know.
knock and, you know,
But it's not
like,
here yet, is it?
It's beyond Band-Aids and
It's gonna be
patches
nice and shiny and
well, we're gonna keep that
beautiful.
in Julie's office. We already had let it stay there. The other one was in there. MIS is great. They drop all the links from our office over there. There's no point moving anything around. She's great to work with, so she agreed let it here, and whatever we need to print, we'll just print like business as usual out of their office. So.
Thank you, Gary.
All right,
Thanks for your
folks. Thanks a
time,
lot. All right,
Gary.
good night.
Courtney is on page 125.
Hey, Court.
Welcome, Courtney.
For a second, I thought you busted my chops. You're referring to my daughter. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I didn't turn on Courtney.
Wrong one.
TV audience like it.
Okay.
So Courtney, urgent, Wading River. Oh, wait a minute, let's go right to the first one here. It's,
Right to the urgent.
Wading River Water Treatment Plant. And Deanville Road.
Study.
Deanville Road. We've already started working on that, right?
Greenville Road, which one would you like me to start with?
Let's start with the first one, Wading River.
Wading River, okay. As you know, we did the upgrade to the filter beds, back starting in 2015. The reasoning for rehabbing the filter beds was additional volume and turbidity removal at the plant. Basically, we had turbid water and not very much of it. So what we have now is a plant, the water's crystal clear, we're getting volume out of it. But as everybody knows, we were out of compliance with our THMs in the fall of 2018. From looking at information with that plant online, when it's offline for maintenance, when we slow flows, that's where they're coming from. The bulk of where the THMs are coming from is that plant. We've talked to Tater and Howard, and what they've proposed is a dissolved air flotation pilot study. And basically what this is, the study, they would bring a trailer on site. They channel some of the water from the beds out of the process. And I mean, if you picture like basically a tank and it looks almost like carbonated soda, basically they add a coagulant or a polymer and it lifts the THM forming compounds out and you skim them off the top. And then it continues on through the process.
So if you came up with a process to skim all of the THM, what happens to it after you capture it?
Okay, what happens to it after we capture it, it forms a residual solid. And what we do at West Street, we send it to sewer. We don't have that option in Mansfield. There's no sewer, and there will be no sewer available. And what Tater and Howard is looking at is on-site drying lagoons, which so often would have to be shoveled or scraped out and the solids be brought off-site.
And then is this process that they're planning on, a proven process that's been used someplace else?
It has, currently, it's used a lot in the Midwest. Currently, there's two fairly local plants. They're using it in Falmouth, which either just went online or is being prepared to go online, and also one in Milford, and we're actually working on scheduling a visit to one or both of the plants to take a look.
So Wading River is an important contributor to the whole system. About what percentage of water comes out of Wading River?
Currently, over the winter, we're getting probably about 40%. If we maxed the flow, not worrying about the THMs, we would be getting over half of our winter production from that plant.
Wow.
Over the summer, average day about a quarter to a third.
Yep. So that's a $315,000 expense. That's obviously going to be a bond.
Courtney, please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is one of the items that we met about with the Finance Committee last week.
Yes.
And part of what we're waiting to receive from Tater and Howard, was it? The 2-year funding plan. So it's an extensive process that the 2 years is through the DEP and the monitoring and the plan, and everything has to be proposed. So before there was a recommendation for either bond or add to the rate as a capital line, there was we needed some additional potential information relative. Is it cost heavy up front? Is it really over a 24-month period, because it's a 2-year plan that has to go through the process and to be approved, right? So
Right.
Unfortunately, we're still at the planning stage. We know it would be user rate or retained earnings. Is it something that can be blended into the rate over a 2-year period? Is it something that realistically would have to be funded in the fall after retained earnings are established for the department? Some of that is contingent upon the cash flow analysis that is provided by Tater and Howard and the expectation of overall costs. How much of that $315 is in year one? Is it really over the 24 months? Is $200,000 of it really, for the mobilization of the trailer that comes on site? That would impact all of that.
Unfortunately, everything Courtney does is really expensive. So the next thing that's on there is $900 and $35,000 for the Deanville Road repair. Is that the same story? I mean, you talked about that last week as well?
We went through almost every page. Actually, we got through all of yours, including vehicles, in your meeting.
Yeah, we went through all the urgents, all the ones, something on there that is a 1 and should have been listed as a 2, and the vehicles.
Pardon me?
Thanks. They're actually, they got submitted as a 2 and ended up as a 1.
So, Deanville Road, that's Fund 330. There has been already engineering money has been expended. If that project was going to be a borrowing, it's my understanding that construction on that would not commence until after July 1st, because that would be taken into consideration for the debt service in the department. So, school's still out on the final plan for that. I would expect that to be a bond authorization from the administration at some point. The timing of the authorization would be related to construction costs. My understanding would be, even if there was an authorization, if an authorization would be placed before the municipal council prior to the end of this fiscal year, it would be for a proper planning process with no intention for construction to commence before 7/1. And that would be directly related to considerations of retained earnings, timing of things, and making sure nothing happens that would adversely impact them.
Yes, Council Dolan.
Didn't we already, what have we been doing on Deanville Road?
On Deanville Road, so far what's been funded is the consultant design is actually near complete. What they're waiting on now is approval from Mass DOT. Because again, the main goes under the highway interchange between tonight and 95. So everything that they design has to get submitted to DOT for comment.
So that's where we're at now.
Yes.
So possible bid scenario would be a March timeframe, right? But this
For
loan
approval from
authorization has
DOT?
been-
Is that what you mean?
The note I have from the meeting was that the earliest they could even try to do a bid would be in March to get final cost, right? Yeah. But the final loan authorization for this has not moved forward.
Right.
That's my recollection.
Right.
Yeah. So there would still need to be final cost assembly with some cash flow analysis provided by the engineering firm. Would still have to come before the municipal council, make sure it's in compliance with the comprehensive plan through the planning department. Authorization to issue, potential go to construction at some point after fiscal year 20, so that if it was borrowed as a ban, it wouldn't impact your 21 budget, it would impact your 22 budget.
So bottom line is, neither one of these items will be in our message to the council or the council's message to the mayor, because it's all bonding. Right? We can go to vehicles. Yes?
Can I just ask one more question?
Sure.
How were you able to trace the THMs to Wading River?
Sure.
I'm not like trying to trick you or anything. I'm just curious. Like, is it because it's our largest source, or what do you think?
No, actually, we originally started talking to Tater and Howard about just kind of kicking the can around, talking about manganese. Mass DEP keeps bringing up regulating manganese, and they've been doing it for years, and they haven't. And we get seasonal manganese at both plants. West Street, we can either change sources or we remove it. Wading River, it just makes it through the plant and out into the system. So it was just one of those things to look at as a future project for manganese removal, like way out. We started pulling old numbers, old sampling, and started looking at Wading River and going, hey, we never actually specifically sample a plant for THM formation. We don't sample them for THMs themselves. It's not in the regs. We don't do it. What we did start pulling is VOCs, and certain THMs are on, it's a volatile compound, so it falls on the full volatile compound list. And what we found was Wading River actually has higher chloroform than some of the sample sites in the city do. Chloroform is a THM. So looking back, I ended up charting, and I can send this to you if you're interested in seeing it, or I can leave it. I have other copies. I started looking at what our THM results looked at per quarter since the plant has been back online after the rehab. And you can, because it is down for maintenance, we pull it down for pump replacement, we pull it down for bed scraping. So throughout the year it is off and on, and you can actually watch the trend results. If you look at them, like we sample, like for example, every May, and you can see May with the plant off. The results are down here. The next May, the plant's online.
Right.
Yeah, and you can actually watch them zigzag. So,
Interesting.
and just to prove it out, we had the plant offline in the fall. We had it down for maintenance for a pump replacement. We were planning on bringing it online at the beginning of November. The sampling was the next week, so I made the decision to leave it offline, see what the November results looked like. Low. Like way lower than last November and any other November that it's been online since.
Interesting.
Thanks. They're not,
Yes.
they're not urgents, but they were number ones listed on page 126. And the result of that discussion that we had, that were not bonding, but things that Courtney and the administration highlighted that likely would be coming to the council in the fall of 2020, which would be after the next retained earnings certification, were the water main on Park Place and the water main on Lonsdale Ave. And Courtney made sure to point out to us that the upgrade to the SCADA system and the security at the water treatment plant is something that is required by June of 2021. So those 3 items, I'm not going to be surprised if those would be priority items that come before the council at some point in either the near future or certainly in the fall in particular. That was my understanding of the conversation.
The SCADA system, is that a Unix system?
I'm sorry?
Is that SCADA system a Unix system? No, it's just an open system on Windows.
If you mean if we can remotely access it,
Right.
yes.
So you've got a virtual private network to that system.
We do. The plants talk to each other through a VPN tunnel, and we can also access it remotely. The upgrade that's listed on here, there's actually several parts to it. Some of it is, the computers themselves are original to the upgrade back in 2013. We all know how long a desktop computer lasts, which is not very long. So it's upgrading the computers, bringing in new software, upgrading the reporting software. So that's part of it. Upgrading the security for the VPN between the 2 plants. Setting up a DMZ server, which is basically, it sits in between the internet and the plant, like in between the internet and the SCADA system, and it basically gives like a firewall, what it lets in and out. Setting up, for example, right now, I could actually get into the Westgate plant with my phone. If somebody could hack my phone, they could get into the plant just by logging me in. No credentials, no nothing. So it's setting up, more security with being able to get in and out of the plant.
You can get in with your phone, and you don't have to get in through like VPN or anything?
It's a login. Yeah. Could you do it? No, but if you had my phone and could get into it, yes. The way it's set up now.
So let's talk about vehicles. You've got a pickup truck, 2 pickup trucks, 3 pickup trucks, 4 pickup trucks.
I do. Actually, we can start with the second one on the list and the third one on the list. The second truck that's on the list, it's a replacement.
Page 140, yep.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
That's okay. This one is a truck. It was being used by maintenance. It will not pass inspection. It is parked. It runs, it's failed emissions, it's, the bed's rotting off, the floors are rotting out. It's been T-boned, it's been in another major accident and fixed, and it's done. That particular truck is parked and off the road right now. And the next one down basically ended up parked and off the road while I was working on my capitals this year. It's blown engine, blown transmission, so it's got 250,000 miles on it.
Courtney, are these the two vehicles that you recently sent a communication to the mayor for replacement now?
Yes.
The plan is for those particular vehicles to come out of the current certification, and I would expect that those would make it to this honorable body in the very near future.
Yeah, we probably will not include water and wastewater in our message to the mayor because it's all user rate. But it's very important to get you here for this process so that we can go through, plan and understand what's going on, because when you send bond requests down to the council, we've already got a general understanding at 20,000 feet of what's going on, and of course, we'll call you in whenever we think we need to get a bit deeper understanding, but your department and your capital improvements are pretty straightforward. And your predecessor did a fine job of planning things out and getting things ahead of failure. And I see you doing the same thing, so the user rate is the user rate. It's got to take care of the capital as well. Agree?
Which, if there's a lot of capital, it has to go up. If there are a lot of bonds, it has to go up.
Yes.
So, but these two items are, I believe, slated for sooner rather than later. So I know they say 2021, but I would expect you to see those within a month. Probably sooner, right?
Yes.
I just wanted you to be aware of that. So you're talking about it tonight, and it's not something that's going to be in the fall. It's not going to be next year. Those two, I believe, are a direct result of recent meetings and conversations that those have been moved forward.
So is Courtney in a position where she could have a capital improvements line item in her budget under the user rate?
If the will of the administration and the municipal council was to start to fund a budget line for whatever 1 cent of rate equals, you could conceivably say, let's for simplicity's sake, say 1 cent of rate equals $10,000, and you wanted to raise $100,000, you'd raise the rate 10 cents, and you put a corresponding line in the budget.
And does she have to spend that in 1 year?
Even if she didn't spend it in 1 year, her retained earnings are separate. So it would fall through basically to her retained earnings, and you could use it to fund an acquisition of an asset in the future, or you could use it to defray a future bond cost. Instead of borrowing for something, you might be able to pay for it in cash.
So I'd like for you to think about that. And I'd like you to think about that because it's a longer term solution. And together with your good planning, which we've seen demonstrated in the past, I think that it would be a better way to manage the money.
You need to just recognize as a body that the rate would have to be set higher. So,
Yes.
and whenever I say things are going to cost more money and you have to raise the money somehow, it's very unpopular. So, in fairness to the discussion, and I don't know, what is 1 cent a rate is 11,000 or 13,000 for you?
It's just over 16,000.
16. So,
So that's something we're going to talk about.
When was the last time did the rates go up every year?
2016 was the last one.
Yep.
We'll just say it was Deb's idea.
Any other questions for Courtney? Courtney, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're all set. So, that concludes the business that we have tonight. I'd like to call for recess to February 3rd at 6:30.
I require a second.
I've got one from Mr. Councilor Waterman. All in favor of recessing?
Aye.
Aye. Recessed until February 3rd at 6:30. Thank you all for your participation tonight. We got a lot accomplished.